Hello, and welcome to I Am Not For Everyone, the podcast for those looking to release shame, heal from trauma, and feel really, really good being their fully expressed, authentic selves. My name's Dr. Lee, and I am a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner and a certified clinical trauma professional, as well as a mom, wife, and a human being navigating the world with complex PTSD. Season 1 of this podcast came about because I was tired of spending decades living in a shame-filled, trauma-laden body and brain. And after doing a lot of work and learning how to return to a safe, grounded place in my life, I knew it was time for me to take my experience in education and use my voice to unsilence myself, to release the leftover shame, and to give others permission to do the same. On Season 2 of this podcast, I'm going to be sharing my experience in education. But even more importantly, I'm going to be bringing on some incredible guests who are going to unsilence themselves. They're going to share their own stories of trauma, shame, and their journeys to healing, resiliency, and self-acceptance. While I believe these episodes will be deeply impactful, I do want to add a disclaimer that we're going to be talking about some potentially triggering topics. So please take the invitation to pause or skip or fast forward on any episode, and to treat yourself gracefully and kindly after each time that you listen. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm really jazzed because I have one of my favorite humans here with me. She is a friend and a former client and a fellow coach and just an awesome person all around. So I'm going to let Kayleigh introduce herself to you now.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for having me. It's such sweet words. I'm Kayleigh Hanlin. I have a dual career. So the first thing I do is I have a business with my mom that we started together called Empowered Minds. And we wrote a guided activity journal for young girls ages, 7 to 14-ish, right in that tween age, right? For them to discover themselves, to explore, to do gratitude, to do daily reflections, to really get that mindset work going early on. And then we also do online courses. We do speaking events, coaching, all kinds of fun things. And then I'm also a purchasing coordinator full-time in the corporate career world. So I do all of that together. And when I'm not doing either of those things, you can find me eating chicken wings all over the state or reading a book. So those are my other two favorite things I love to do.
Two of my favorite things that you do on social media are you share the books that you're reading that are like for teenagers, which I think is so cool that you do that because I have taken a couple of those to my tweens. And your wing journey. I'm all because we live in the same city. So it's like when you go places, I'm like, ooh, I got to check that place out now. So totally unrelated, but like also like if you like wings and you want books for your tweens, like go follow Kayleigh because there's other reasons to follow. So I'm really excited to have you tell everybody your story around this, shameful, traumatic experience, both psychologically and physically that you went through. So please, give us all the details.
Sure. So I was born with a congenital heart defect or congenital heart disease. They've changed it over the years. So to keep everything short and sweet, I'm just going to call it a CHD for the rest of the podcast. It's a mouthful. So by the time I was 4 years old, I had already had 3 open heart surgeries to correct the issues that were going on. And that's not a light surgery for those of you who don't have any medical background. They're breaking things in you to get to your heart, and then they're sewing things back up and you're in the hospital for long periods of time. So it was definitely a very long stretch of the first couple of years of my life to be in and out of the hospitals constantly, not a normal childhood per se. So because of my surgeries, I have one very long scar that starts at my breastbone and goes all the way down a couple inches before my belly button. This has healed over the years. I'm in my 30s, but still it is a very prominent scar. It is very noticeable. I also have another one running across the left side of my chest. It's a little less noticeable, but it's still there. And then I also have 3 small scars kind of around my belly button that are from the feeding tubes that I had over the years. So they actually kind of look like multiple belly buttons, if you will. So obviously, like I said, my childhood from the get-go was not a normal one to be had. And so growing up, I had this stigma about my body that I looked different than everyone else because I had these scars. And I also felt different than everybody else because in layman's terms, my heart condition, I don't use one side of my heart. I don't have a valve. It was never formed. So basically they bypassed it. And so I get tired more easily than my peers. I visibly look depleted, I suppose, or even like ghost faced or white, or even sometimes I could change, my hands will change purple a little bit, a purplish tint if I'm not getting the oxygen that I need. So not only did I like physically look different, but I acted a little different than my peers. So growing up, I had friends, that accepted me right when we were little kids. It didn't quite notice it. But as you get into those, especially those tween years, when you're going to pool parties as a kid, I hated doing that in the beginning because I didn't want to wear a swimsuit where it showed my scar. I didn't like that. I didn't know how to feel when people asked me what happened. Most kids assumed, and even adults sometimes would assume that something terrible had happened. And it's not so much a terrible thing. It's just I was born with this condition and I had to have these surgeries and it's okay. And, I live my life around that. But people had thought all kinds of different things. And so it was very uncomfortable. And I had to get used to explaining my scars in a way that didn't take, forever or people didn't understand. But at the same time that it wasn't going to get me into a conversation, especially as a child or a middle school kid who didn't want to like talk about all this stuff with somebody totally random, or even just like a teacher or an older adult who I didn't feel comfortable with talking to. Mm-hmm. And then over the years, when I got into high school, I actually had friends who would tease me about like the feeding tube scars because they did kind of, like I said, look like Southgate belly buttons. And in high school, I kind of played it off and I just let it go and I would joke with them too. But over the years, especially the last few years with the work that I've been doing in mindset and trauma informed, it did make me realize like I really didn't like those comments. And it did kind of hurt a lot more than what I made it seem like during those moments in my life. So I've had to process some of them and move beyond that, knowing that I never got to tell those people how I felt. But at the time, I think they were just trying to be funny and connect. And people say comments all the time, right? They're trying to be helpful or they're trying to ask something because they want to know, but they don't realize what they're doing. So there are some days I just kind of have to shrug it off. But it wasn't until college that I really got to love the scars that I have. So especially in high school and early college, I actually got really worried and shameful about dating guys because I didn't know what they would say about me, right? I didn't look like your average person in that sense. And so as I got older, it wasn't just when I was a kid, it was TV shows and movies and those and magazines, you saw all these great models or these great actors and actresses and they all looked perfect. And I didn't look anything like any of them. And then when I got older, social media came out on the scene. And not only did I look like no one in the celebrity world, I didn't look like anybody on these social media sites either. I didn't have a tribe, if you will, in that way. So when I got to college, I was concerned about dating people and what they would say and just being on my own. But it's really at that point where I started to really love my scars for what they are and how much they show my true grit, my resilience, the ability to get through this, the pride that I have for being a CHDer and finding the community that I have found. So that's really the story in a nutshell.
I thank you. No, so I have a few reflections. The first is that, the amount of time that you spend in a hospital as a child, especially, I did nursing clinicals on a peds cardiac unit. I remember some of these babies that had the open heart surgeries and just what they could and couldn't do. And just your life was very different. The life of for your family was probably very different for those first several years. And even when those patients would have their defects or their disorders healed or cured or surgically fixed, I know that a lot of the parents and the kids, there was some residual psychological mental stuff around okay, but am I actually okay now? Am I allowed to do things that I didn't used to be allowed to do? And I think I remember us having a conversation about you saying that like people really worried about you. Like they didn't trust you to be able to know what you could and couldn't do.
Yes. Yeah. I've had that experience a couple of times in my life. I relate it to almost being like glass. Children with health issues across the board, whether it's CHD or something different. If you tell an adult this, and now being an adult, I get it, right? It's someone else's child. You are trying to be helpful, but from my perspective as the kid, right, you're telling me, no, I can't do this. You're judging me before you even ask. You are putting limitations on me without seeing what my abilities are. And so I got really frustrated growing up like that. Like I had a gym teacher, for example, that did that was new to the school, didn't really know, read my chart, totally freaked out. No, you can't do these things, but I've been doing them this whole time. Mm-hmm. So now it is, yes. There have been times where I've been treated almost like I said, glass, right? So the adult is afraid that if they drop it or drop the ball, right, something would happen to you. And then they would be in a world of hurt. So I've had to learn how to speak up for myself. And I'll give my parents credit 1,000 times over, because that's the best thing they ever taught me growing up with this condition is, you know your body best. You can speak up for yourself. And if something happens, please come to us or a trusted adult, and we will figure it out. If it's serious, we will resolve it. If it's not so much and you're just being lazy and want to get out of something, like we'll work through that as well. Because there were definitely times that having this condition, I won't lie, like I've used it growing up, like, oh, I don't really want to go to soccer today. You know, when my parents signed me up for things I didn't want to do. And I was like, I'm good. Like, I don't feel well. And they would, roll their eyes and be like, I'm sure you feel fine. Like, let's go. So yes, there were times I had to really speak up for myself and say, this is what's happening to my body right now. And I need you to help me resolve the issue. But for the most part, I just appreciated people letting me try things. I just wanted to show my ability and test it out and be to the point that I could be like my peers, right? And all my peers weren't equal either over time, but nobody remembers that when you're a kid. Everybody just thinks everyone else knows the things that you don't know, right? So you don't realize that everybody else is also in all these different levels. You just think, crap, I can't do that, or I can't run that fast, or I can't whatever. And you hold yourself back when in reality, half the class is also doing the same thing. Oh, I can't run as fast as the other kid, or I can't play soccer that well, or I don't just shoot hoops like that. But in the end, I realized speaking up for myself and my body was the best thing they could have ever taught me. So that was how I got over that, especially with adults, to just say, hey, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm healthy. I can do this. Let me try. And I'll tell you if something's wrong. I'll tell you if I need a break. I'll tell you if I need a water break or to sit down or whatever.
I'm having a moment here because you're helping me realize something. So I want to say thank you for this just to start, because one of my twins had a congenital birth defect where half of his left lung formed as a benign tumor instead of as lung. And so it was pretty significant to the point that like his heart was on the wrong side of his body. His trachea was pushed over to the side. He had to have surgery at 4 days old. Had asthma for years, has some nice scars, which I think is interesting between boys and girls, because he's like, I can't, like, he likes showing off his scars. He thinks they make him tough, which I know is like a little bit of a gendered stereotype that I just shared, but like happens to be true in this case. But like, just as a parent, especially in the beginning, like when he would want to do stuff, we were always like, internally you're going, like, I don't know that I want to let you do this. And then externally I'm going, okay, but like he has to learn how to know what his own limits are. Cause like if we never let him find the limits, he's never going to know what the limits are. And like, so I am just reflecting on the fact that like when you said that you appreciated your parents doing that, I'm like, goodness, I hope he says that too. But like also from the parent perspective, that's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, I'm sure that they were terrified the entire time, all the time. Even now, probably. I'm sure they're terrified.
I mean, and so like, and I know there's a lot of parents probably out here listening to this, like with kids who've had things like that. And it's such a, you don't want to shame your kid. You don't want to limit them. You don't want to create like past painful learning around this thing. And you also like your fundamental job is to keep them safe. Like that's the one reason you exist as a parent is like to keep your kids safe. Right. So it's like, it's a very, it's a fine line to walk. So the other thing that I was thinking about when you were telling your story at the beginning was this body image piece, because holy cow, right? Like it's one thing when you can kind of cover it up, but when you're starting to get into like, you know, I'm going to the beach, or like I am going to start, you know, dating and being intimate with other people, or you know, I want to be able to wear the midriff and not have anybody like say anything about it. I think that this is a piece that, you know, with invisible illnesses, it's almost the opposite, right? Of like, nobody can see the thing. And so I'm constantly having to prove that I have a thing, versus with this, it's like, I'm constantly having to show people like, no, I am okay. And like explain the thing and talk about the thing. And so how you talked about it a little bit, but like, what are some of the most common questions you get? Like what is your response? Are you, do you typically joke about it, or like, what do you do?
I wish I was that clever to joke about it. I have, I will say this, I did grow up going eventually to a camp that was specific for children like myself who had CHDs. So over the years, I did meet a variety of kids with all kinds of problems, because CHD, like every other medical condition, has a wide range, right? You could never need surgery ever and be fine. You could not survive. So I've met everybody in between. And I did have a lot of friends that would make jokes, right? Like, oh, I got attacked by a shark, or just something so goofy and outlandish that people would like stop and be like, I'm sorry, what did this 10-year-old just say to me? You know, but I was too shy as a kid to like ruffle adult feathers at the time. So I would just be polite and be like, oh, I have a heart condition. Like I've had open heart surgery. That's usually the first question is like, oh, what happened? Or even when I started working in the corporate world, I think that was the most telling. In my early 20s, because I would have staff members, especially males. I don't know what it was, but I would have coworkers who obviously I would wear whatever I wanted to, you know, professional wise into these places. Because at that point, I really had turned a corner of living out loud and being myself and being okay with showing off the scars in the way that, you know, I'm going to wear whatever I choose to wear. So people would be like, you know, after they would get to know me a little bit, they'd be like, hey, you know, I don't want to ask, but I'm curious, like, what is this? Like, are you okay? Like, did something happen? You know, and some people think it's a birth defect. Some people don't know what it is, so they ask. Mostly it's what happened. And then when I say, oh, I have a heart condition, or I've had open heart surgery a couple times, it's like big eyes. And then, oh, wow, that's crazy. And they immediately have to tell me they've never met anybody that has done that. Like, that's so crazy. That's so cool. Do you remember anything? That's the other question I always get. Oh, do you remember? No, I'm 4 years old or younger. I have 2 memories and that is it. And like, they're very small, nothing major. So not really. And honestly, probably to my parents, to their enjoyment, I suppose, I don't remember a lot of it that they clearly remember very vividly, probably to this day, especially the times. You know, I would get stories told to me by my grandparents or aunts and uncles that watched me, or even friends of my parents that would come and visit, or had kids similar to me in the hospital that they met and became friends with. You know, people telling me like, oh, you just didn't want that catheter that day, and they had to bribe you with Twizzlers, and like you lost your mind, and it was so sad to watch you because you're just this itty bitty little thing screaming and yelling, you know. So I have those stories that people do tell me, but no, when people ask me if I have any memories, I just have 2, and honestly, they're not very exciting, so it's not worth sharing. But those are kind of the common questions. What happened? And then, you know, oh, do you remember anything? Or like, do you have to go? And then do you have to go back? Or do you have any other issues? And the answer is no. I mean, I get checked once a year. I have an adult cardiologist now because that's a thing in the world, which is awesome that they've been able. Pediatrics has expanded so much, right? The kids are surviving. This wasn't something 50 years ago that was happening. We didn't have adult cardiology as a branch of medicine that you could study. We do now because there's 1 million adults in America alone living with CHD. So they have a whole new brand new medicine to work with us, especially someone like myself who identifies and is female. If I want children, I've been cleared for that, but it's a very different pregnancy than somebody just randomly on the street, right? Compared to myself. So there are all kinds of new medical things that are kind of going along with this, which is really cool actually to watch in my lifetime. So I much rather share that sort of thing than, silly memories or things that I don't care to continue bringing up, I suppose.
Yeah. Ooh. Okay, so first of all, my son likes to pretend that he got bit by a shark. That's his thing. His scar is on the side because he had a thoracotomy. So they went into his lung on the side, and so he's got 2 chest tube marks, and then the it looks like a fish hook scar from where they removed the lung, and it looks like an upside down smiley face or like a shark got him. So he calls it his shark bite. So I think that's hilarious. Not hilarious that somebody said that to you, but just the coincidence.
No, it's hilarious that the kids have the wit to think of such entertaining comments, because at the end of the day, you don't really need to ask a child what happened. If you're concerned because you're in a role that needs to be concerned, like a teacher or a coach, ask the parents. I mean, you can ask the child as well. I'm sure they'll tell you, but at least ask in an appropriate, environment, not just randomly, oh, what happened to you? Well,
yeah. Well, and you're bringing up,
I don't know.
Yes. You're bringing up such a good point. Cause I think this goes with anybody who is quote unquote appears different, right? As humans, we are so curious about people who appear different than us or different than what we're used to seeing, right? It's a natural, it's evolutionarily important, because we used to be wait a second, why does this person look different than the rest of us do, right? That was something that we needed to know. And in today's world, you don't need to know if the woman shopping next to you at the grocery store, why she has a scar, right? But that inherent curiosity is in us. And so many of us haven't learned how to, when it's appropriate to ask questions or how to ask the questions in a way that's not shaming. I think of when my kids were younger and they'd see someone who was differently abled, and they we'd be in the grocery store and they'd be like, Mom, what's wrong with that person? So many parents scoop up the kid and run, right? They're like, oh, no, you can't ask that. And it's if we actually taught kids, you're allowed to be curious, right? And, you can ask me that question, or would it feel good for her to be asked that question? And so it's helpful to hear your perspective of I think when a 5-year-old asks, again, it's curiosity. As adults, if you don't need to know that information to do your job, you don't need to know that information to take care of this person or interact with this person, you can leave it alone. And it's yes. So I think that teaching our kids, it's okay to be curious, right? And in that moment, not scooping them up and shaming them for being curious. And also learning how we can have, learning that our curiosity is normal. And also we don't need to get our curiosity satisfied all the time unless it's directly applicable to what's going on.
Yes, that's actually a really good lesson we all probably need.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think the more we normalize the curiosity when we're younger, we won't be such weirdos about it when we get older. It's just a personal opinion.
Yes.
But,
no,
anyway.
It's 100% true. If kids my age or people in my class had asked me, it would have been easier than them just talking about it behind my back, or I think about it and I'm like, gosh, if they had just asked, I probably would have told them, and it's fine. Yeah. And then we would have been okay. But the weirdness or the not knowing how to perceive with people because they are of a different ability, then yes, it would have been easy. And it's probably easy to answer those questions and then move on, right? You want to tell people what's going on in your life, but when people make it awkward, then you feel awkward and then the whole thing is awkward.
I mean, it's not the same thing. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it's the same thing, but I am a light-skinned multiracial woman. So white, Black, and Cherokee on both sides. And what I think is really interesting is people will come up to me and I'm curious if this is how they ask you the question too. They'll be like, so, are you like, what's going? And I'm like, are you trying to ask me what my ethnicity is? And they're like, yes. I'm like, great. Fine to tell you. Also, like, we just met, so I'm not sure why, like, why you need to have that information, right? And part of me is like, the trauma-informed piece of me that understands curiosity is like, yeah, I can tell you. And then there's another part of me, just as a human, that's like, it would be so great if we could get to know each other first. And then this could be a topic of conversation. Because the thing is like, as we spend time together, that answer is probably naturally going to come out.
Right. Yes. I'm not going to pretend that these things are, like you said, the same thing, but they're similar in their own way. Right. So,
yeah.
Not that they're similar, but they have a similarity in the sense that, what does it matter what my ethnicity is, or what does it matter that I have a heart condition, right? Get to know me for me. Will that change your perspective on things? Because if it does, then why are we even interacting down this path, right? Unless we work together and are forced to. But I'm okay telling you, like I said, I'm very proud. I've moved beyond the shame part of these scars and really, like I said, live my life out loud with these things. And I'm very proud to represent a CHD community. And I'm happy to tell you things. But will it change your perspective of me? And I'm assuming, and I'm assuming in using that word this way, in the sense that you probably feel the same with your ethnicity. Like, what does it matter where I fall on a spectrum of colors? Do you like me for me or not? Do you want to be my friend? Do you want to, move forward with this relationship and whatever this looks like? So does it matter? Even if your curiosity brain is trying to figure it out, what happened, looking at scars, or what ethnicity are you when you look at a person, does it matter? Like, does your curiosity need to be fulfilled? Because it probably, like you said, it probably will somewhere along the way as the relationship develops. But in this instant of meeting me in a 5-minute chat, or the first time you ever met me, what will it change your opinion? Because if it does, that's where I'm concerned more than anything else.
That is such a good point. And also, I'm an open book on Facebook, y'all. Like, go stalk my posts for 5 seconds. You'll see my father. You'll see my mother. You'll see my husband. You'll see my kids. You'll know exactly what's going on. It's pretty evident, right? And probably the same for you. Like, I know you talk about CHD on your page and on your social media. So, like, just, I think a helpful point for listeners who maybe like have those questions or have those curiosities, like, if it's going to make a difference, ask. If you think it's going to make a difference, ask. Like, that's fine. And like, let's ask also why it makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes that's the thing that you need to spend your time focusing on, not what the actual answer to the question is, but like why you need the answer. So what do you feel like from all of this was the part that felt the most shameful that you had to move past?
Probably my ability to love my own body. Because at the end of the day, most people around me probably didn't care as much as I thought they cared.
Sure.
And so I had to spend more time learning how to truly love myself in what I looked like. Because unlike hair color or even weight, where you could potentially, and not everybody can. So I will just say, this is a kind of an example, but not really. Like, unlike weight, where you can lose weight if you're not happy with the size that you are, or you could, tone up or whatever. I can't really get rid of my scars. In fact, I can't. This is the way they're going to look forever until I am no longer walking this earth. So I had to learn how to love my body as it was. And I had to really get to a point in my life where not one size fits all look was everyone. And part of that was meeting other people in the CHD world, and also seeing their different scars and how cool they were and what they've chosen to do with them, or how they, represent themselves. And the other part of it was accepting my condition as a gift rather than a burden, and knowing that, I'm, because of these scars, and these scars get to show that I survived long after the doctor's predictions ever, thought in the beginning. And I have come full circle in all of this work I've been doing, and I've moved beyond this thought of like, these are ugly, these are awful, I don't want them on me, to these are amazing, these are unique, these are my battle scars that I physically get to have. Everybody has battle scars anyway, and in the emotional world, but I get to physically show them off and then say, look, I'm a survivor. So that's really where I had to pivot, I guess, is loving myself. Because honestly, like I said, I think most of it was in my head of what I thought other people thought, when in reality, they didn't care, or they didn't care as much as I gave them credit for caring. Even though they didn't tell me, I just made it up in my head. I made all kinds of stories up on what people would think of me at the pool or at the beach. What would people think of me as I get more into intimate relationships? What would people think of me as I go into the workforce? Do I need to explain myself every 5 minutes? You know, and really, I probably made it a bigger deal than it was. And so I had to rewrite those stories.
Well, and I want to just like, for anyone, you know, whether they are metaphorical or actual physical scars, right? From a body acceptance standpoint, you know, when we're like adolescents and teenagers, the reason why that period in our life feels so damn traumatic, right? Where most of us are like, there's a lot of trauma that happened to us, like hashtag high school, right? Is because our brains are so egocentric at that point. We do, the world does really revolve around us in a sense, much more so than when we get older and our brains fully develop. And so like, it makes sense that there was a big part of you that was like, I feel like this is a big deal to others. I feel like the whole world is noticing this, because that is legitimately how it felt, right? Like that was your reality. And so I think just normalizing that, because a lot of people, I think when we get older and we come out of that, we're like, oh, I can't believe that I thought that way. But like, and you know, it's just one more way that we shame ourselves. I can't believe that I used to think that. I can't believe I spent so much time disliking myself. Well, it actually makes sense when you go back and look at how our society's set up, how we normalize, especially female bodies. Or I should say like denormalize female bodies, right? How we set the standard for how people are supposed to look. And then like with that egocentrism, it feels like everyone is noticing that you are outside of that standard.
Yes.
So what is, now that you have really like accepted that, I know that you bring this into your work a little bit. Like, I know that this has influenced why you do the work that you do. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Like how you bring your experience into the coaching work that you do?
Yeah. Most of my experience has really been brought into and almost dumped into the Joy Journal, which is the guided activity journal that my mom and I wrote together. So we wanted a way to teach young girls all the mindset work that her and I had learned. For her, she didn't even start till she was in her 30s. For me, I got lucky enough that I was around my parents very early on, when years and years ago, when Tony Robbins was on infomercials, and my mom was up late with me at night, either feeding or whatever. And I would, you know, all the hospital visits and transitions and everything I was going through, she was watching these infomercials. She was listening to this stuff. And then it rolled on from there to other people doing this personal development and mindset work. And so I was very lucky and fortunate to kind of grow up around that with my parents, watching them do the work themselves. So I learned a lot of it along the way and skipped some steps that most adults are now just starting to figure out. So we dumped all of this into the Joy Journal, lovingly putting everything we could, you know, pull from ourselves, like answering the question, what would our lives look like if we had known this at 12, at 15, at 22, at 32, right? Where would we be in our lives? What would we have done instead of all the other what ifs and, oh, I shouldn't have done that and yada, yada, right? So we built this book so that young girls could go through these different prompts to really explore themselves and learn to love themselves as they are in this moment. And that's my biggest thing that I am trying to bring to the world with my business, is to learn to love yourself in this moment. And loving yourself isn't just loving the parts that you like about yourself, right? that's one part of it, but it's also loving the ugly or the shameful or the gross or the bad or the whatever, right? You accept the light and the dark, and you know and recognize where you may want to make changes, and then you move forward from there. You don't have to criticize and shame yourself for, oh, well, I'm not like this. Well, you're not like this right now, but you can be. Or if you want to be, we can certainly figure out a way to do that for you. And so accepting where you are, accepting who you are is all of what I do. And a lot of it shines in the Joy Journal because I wanted young girls to really learn this in a safe space. And so the book was a perfect way to be able to teach this without us having to, go everywhere, right? Just as two people. But the book can be disseminated all over the world, and these young girls can have a safe space in those pages to write down what's going on in their life. And then the great part about it is they can look back, whether it be 6 months, a year, 6 years from when they did that, and go, wow, look how much I've changed. Or like, wow, look how much I loved myself then in this aspect of my life, and I still love this. That is my passion, whatever it may be, they can see those changes and those ebbs and flows. And I just think that's wonderful. So
that's really, really cool. Yeah. And then you are branching out and starting to actually do more, like you said, I think you said at the beginning, courses.
Yep.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So my mom and I decided to take the Joy Journal with all the feedback that we've gotten and take it a step further. When we wrote the book, we had all different kinds of prompts and ideas and stuff. And so the book only ended up being, a finite amount of space that we could put these things into. And we didn't really know right away after the book was published what we were going to do with all the extra stuff, if you will. And so we have since turned these into online courses that will be launching this fall, which I'm very, very excited about. So we have one on resilience, we have one on communication, and we have one on confidence. And so we've taken these little bits and pieces of the book and expanded them using videos and downloadable worksheets so the girls can kind of do things on their own. And what I like about it is the world, especially with the pandemic, is really starting to shift, which I love. People are learning that they don't need to be in these finite constraint, like societal blocks anymore. And they can kind of go out and do the things and change themselves at any moment. So not only do you have the book for girls who need a physical thing to touch or they enjoy writing and doodling, but now we're going to have the online courses. So someone who enjoys more of the tech side would prefer to do things online, on the computer, on a tablet, whatever, they can do that there, and they can still learn, they can still grow, and they can still explore themselves and develop and get these professional development or personal development building blocks that we as adults are just now really realizing how important they are in our lives. So imagine what the next generation is going to do when they learn this stuff at 6, at 12, at 15, at 20. They're going to be leaps and bounds and changing the world, which is going to be an amazing, beautiful thing.
I got chills. I am blessed, y'all, because I get to try this out first with my girls. So I'm very excited. I'm like, we get to be the first ones to try this out, and I'm really excited for them because it's a shame-filled world out there right now, y'all. Like it is, there's a lot out there, and not, just for everybody. And traditionally, like historically, girls and, people identifying as girls, women, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard for us. And so like getting those skills from the beginning of resilience, of being able to bounce back, of being able to like have something hard happen and figure out how you're going to move through that, of confidence, like so huge. I'm also really just jazzed because you're going to be one of our foundational trauma-informed, psychologically safe teachers, one of our first trips teachers. So that is super, super exciting because like my specialty isn't the young girl space. My specialty is like once you've gone through the things and come out from adolescence and into out of young adulthood and into like that full adulthood, that's where I typically serve. And there's so many other spaces like this adolescent tween space that like are just in such need.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm so excited.
It's so good. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say TRIPS, that's the Institute for Trauma and Psychological Safety. It's our teacher training and our trauma-informed cert, that two separate things that we are bringing to the world that start in January of 2022. So if you want information on that, you can go to the show notes. And Kayleigh, I just want to come back and wrap up asking you this question that I ask everyone, which is, what is one piece of advice that you would give our listeners who either went through a similar experience as you did, or are maybe the parent of a child going through a similar experience that you did? And maybe that's two pieces of advice. That's totally cool too.
Okay. So from someone with my specific lifelong medical condition that has given me the scars it's given me, my advice would be for someone who is in my situation or similarly thereof, building up that self-love for anything you don't love about your body or what it's able or not able to do. So, a few easy ways to do that is to look yourself in the eyes in the mirror and say, insert your name, I love you. So Kayleigh, I love you. And I do that all the time, actually. You should do it every day, but if you can work your way up, that's great. And then do a gratitude list too. I think, I do 3 things in the morning while I'm in the shower. So what am I grateful for? And they can be really basic. And over the years they've grown, but starting with that is really going to help build that self-love and gain awareness with where that shame is sitting in your subconscious and kind of figuring out, okay, I have some work to do here, or we've cleared this and that's great. For a parent who has a child in my situation, I think doing the same things with your child and teaching them that stuff early on is incredibly powerful. Reminding them that they can love themselves, that not only is the parent, like, oh, good night, I love you, but they could also say, insert name, I love myself, or something kind of goofy like that. But I think it builds that path in their brain to be like, I get to love myself as much as everyone around me, loves me, whether it's my siblings or my parents or whatever. I get to love myself too for who I am and my abilities in this current moment. So I think a gratitude list to remind them of what they can do. I do remember every day when I would go to school, whether it be by myself or over the years with my siblings, my mom would always say, make it a great day. And not just like have a great day, but make it a great day. And so it was always like a trigger in my head to be like, okay, how can I actually make this day good? Even if it was the worst day, I flunked all these tests, I sucked at whatever, I fell in the cafeteria, I don't know, whatever was embarrassing at those age, right? I found something to enjoy in that day. A friend is going to come over today, or a friend called me on the phone and it was fun to talk to them, or whatever. And so I think finding those little happiness moments or positive aspects of your day is vital, is important. It's what will keep you going. It's what kind of makes you reflect on your life and helps you see the changes and where you kind of want to go from there. So either direction, I think if you're someone who is a similar condition and you're an adult or you've got kids, the self-love aspect and the gratitude are huge.
You just made me think about our bedtime routine. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to say to my kids, like, I love me and I love you too. And I want them to say, I love me and I love you too back. Like, I think that would be so cool. And also just like recognizing that it's never too late to start doing that.
Yes.
You also just made me realize, like, I was like, when is the last time I told myself that I love myself? Like, I do all this mindset work and all of this, trauma-informed practices. And then I'm sitting here going, I haven't said that to myself in a while. So that sounds like something good to do. I think anybody listening can take that away. So thank you so much. Okay. So we're going to drop the links to the Joy Journal and all of Kayleigh's things in the show notes. If you want to go follow her, get a journal for your kiddos, nieces, whomever. And yeah, Kayleigh, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Lee, for having me. And thank you to the listener for listening.
Bye, y'all. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in learning more about how you can help yourself and others release shame, heal from trauma, and create healthier, safer, more mutually beneficial relationships, I want to invite you to head to our website, institutefortrauma.com. At institutefortrauma.com, you'll find free resources, be able to connect to our free online community, and view our courses and trainings, including our foundational trauma-informed, psychologically safe certification, aka the TRIP certification. Head to institutefortrauma.com today to learn more.